The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, my name is Jamie Shanks. I am the CEO of Sales for Life, and I am here to talk to you about the importance of getting back to basics, improving your sales team's core sales skills, and how learning has a direct correlation to sales results. And I have a special guest here. I'll take myself off the webcam here in a second, just letting people pour in into the webinar itself. I'll go into presenter mode here, taking myself off the webcam. Just want to say hi to everyone, and we'll begin here in a second. The special guest I'd like to introduce you to, and let me now share my screen, is none other than Tom Snyder. And I would have to say, without a doubt, he is one of the best public speakers I have ever seen. And in fact, over the years that I've been going to AAISP events, I basically take scribble notes and actually film Tom as my litmus test to where I need to get on board in my speaking career. So, Tom, perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Jamie. I appreciate it. Yeah, Tom Snyder. I'm founder and managing partner of a company called Funnel Clarity. We're in the sales training and sales performance improvement business. What we do is the perfect complement to what Sales for Life does. And just, in the interest of full disclosure, not only is Jamie Shanks someone I admire and have a long history with, he's also, if you don't know him, one of the world's greatest guys. So you just say a good person, great businessman, and a joy to know. Thanks for inviting me today, Jamie.
Well, thanks, Tom, and I greatly appreciate that. And thank you for the introduction, because everybody, you have to understand the rich history that Tom has with learning and development, because we are going to go deep into the cortex here of L&D. Most people on this call most likely know who I am. Again, CEO of Sales for Life. And our job is transitioning millions of sellers from analog to digital in a sales transformation. So basically, here's the agenda for today and the core issues that I'd like to outline. And I'm going to pass this then to Tom, because Tom's going to take us through why technology, why so many sales leaders and learning and development and sales enablement teams are focusing their attention on the tech stack. They're going tool first. Information sources have increased, and that's, of course, why the tech stack keeps growing. We keep throwing in plug-in data sources. And then Tom can talk about inside sales growth and everything that he's seeing in both small to medium businesses and enterprise. So, Tom, why don't I throw it to you, walk through these points, and then let's start diving deep into everything that you're seeing in the market right now.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jamie, and welcome everyone. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize, if you step back 20 years, 25 years, there was at that time a sustained frustration with the sales field, the sales organization, salespeople, on the part of leaders and organizations, because they never felt they were getting enough out of the sales force, and the sales folks who worked so hard never felt like they were getting all that they really wanted, whether it was leads or information or support. And so when the technology explosion began, it actually landed in very fertile ground. And what it did was hold out hope in a very visceral and vivid way to leaders and salespeople that there are some incredible things you can do with technology which will greatly enhance productivity, and certainly that has come true. So this explosion in technology has taken a lot of people off rubber tires and put them on the phone. It has taken a lot of wasted time and turned it into potentially productive time. That alone has probably been the biggest reason that the number of seats in the inside sales world is growing by 5x, whereas in some industries it's declining, and in most it's a very slow growth rate or flat. And the realization that is emerging is that all those promises of great sales performance haven't actually been totally fulfilled. Now, I don't mean that the technologies aren't great, they are great, but the efficiency alone has not quite kept the promise of what that ultimate increase was going to look like. And one of the things that has begun to emerge is the reintroduction of this idea that if you're going to make a sale, at some point, a human being is going to have to talk to a human being. And that kind of interaction has been studied, believe it or not, for 70 years. The effective interchange between customer and between prospect and seller, customer and seller, has been studied for more than 70 years. And there are some distinct best practices that people have migrated away from unintentionally are now returning to.
Fantastic.
So,
and Tom, would you say that there's been less, because you've been doing this 25, 30 years, is there less investment per sales professional in those skills, and that money just shifted directly to the tech stack? Or what are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Jamie, because two things. Number one, there has been a decline in the level of investment, both from the standpoint of money and the standpoint of calories, that companies are making in the interactive skill sets of their sellers. That has begun to turn. So I think that the trough of that curve has been realized, and now there is a bit of an upswing. The vast majority of that money, and certainly even greater number of calories, were invested in the identification and implementation of various parts of the stack. You'll notice that each new innovation takes a more narrower and narrower view of the niche they support. And there's now, I'm hearing from a lot of sales leaders, license fatigue. They just have gotten to the point where a stack with 4, 5, 6 apps on top of their CRM, with, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and up dollars per year invested per rep for the licensing of it, and then a ever increasing staff of people to maintain and manage that system, has gotten to the point where people's got a lot of fatigue about adding anything new.
Yeah, we had a customer once told us a story that the CFO just walked into this was the chief revenue officer telling us this story, walked in the office and said, you have up to 42 different applications per seller. Not every seller has 42, but we're talking widgets and boobobs, basically from marketing all the way to customer success. Long of the short, I'm giving you enough money to run 7. Go. Up to you on the 7 you keep. And in fact, it was quite an exercise in fertility and of understanding, wow, I still have to keep the yield and throughput of the same sellers constant or growing, of course, growing, but I'm going to have to do it with thousands and thousands of dollars per seller headcount less in tech.
That's a great story. I love that story because I believe it. I really do believe it. I think, it kind of gets to a point where they're kind of a double pincher here, right? One is that the stack itself has begun to produce diminishing returns and produce a bit of license fatigue, and at the same time, there is a recognition of a missing element.
So and missing, yeah.
Yeah, and what's missing really is an attention to this core skills. At the end of the day, we all communicate, and there is a particular aspect to the communication skills, the interactive skills associated with great selling, that have nothing to do with charisma. They have nothing to do with personality. Frankly, they do not have much to do with product or service. They have to do with this particular aspect of interaction that we call sales. It's about professional persuasion, and at its core, it's about helping the buyer make a decision that's good for both seller and buyer. That's literally at the centerpiece of what's missing. And we now have a sales world that's become too dependent on demonstrations, too dependent on technology applications, and we've lost this attention to the quality of that decision coaching, counseling that a salesperson can do.
Fantastic. So you were talking about getting down to that core essence. Can you break down the core skills you're seeing required in the 21st century?
Yeah, I love that. And if someone were to say to me, Tom, from your perspective, if I could only teach a few things, if there were only a few things I can inculcate in my salespeople, what would they be? You know, by far the single most important one is the understanding that when buyers go through a decision process to buy your product or your service, they move through very identifiable and distinct phases. Each of those phases dictates on the part of a quality seller a different kind of dialogue with an attention to different subject matter and different milestones. We call that understanding the customer's perspective. That allows you then to be able to create value for the customer before they ever buy anything, rather than just communicating the value of what you sell. And I wrote a book on this subject, a number of years back. There was a tectonic shift that took place in our world somewhere around 16, 17 years ago, where what used to be the transaction created the value for both parties. I sell you a service or product, you give me money, and we're both better off. There is now the demand that great selling requires you create value before you ever sell anything. The customer has to recognize they got value from the interaction you had with them before they will consummate the transaction, unless you want to sell on a price-driven basis. That means helping the decision be made that's best for both customer and seller. And another big part of that is being able to recognize what's the difference between a real qualified opportunity and something that I'm jamming into my funnel because someone would talk to me. This is a huge gap we see all over the place. People don't have a discernment between folks willing to talk to them from those that are really in a buying frame of reference. And so being able to help customers see a different perspective of their challenge, see their own business in a different way, their own challenges in a different way, is really the core set of skills. And Jamie, I'll tell you what, they're not that hard to learn. This is not like, physics 801. This is easy to learn, takes practice like any other skill.
Well, that's fantastic. Your fourth point, real opportunities, to tell you a real life story of what we did. So we had a slow period in our business 90, 120 days ago. And I was talking to a gentleman named Chad Nuss out of Florida and his agency. And he told me that this happened to his business about a year and a half ago. And what he and his business partner did is they went through an exercise called WILL. What's ideal look like? And what they did is they took all of their signed customers and they broke them into these categories. And then from the categories, there were all these data points. So I'll go from my perspective. There were six kind of main stages, and inside of them had 3 or 4 different data points, a total of 25 data points. From all the way to the mindset that they had when they came into the pre-calls, to who they brought on the call, to the time it took them to execute the agreement, to implementation, and then success on both their end and our end. Long of the short, this data, I couldn't believe how evident it was that sometimes we were jamming crap into the funnel, telling ourselves, yeah, but they want it. No. Based on historical patterns, and we have 300 customers. Some of our clients have 300,000 customers. The data tells you what ideal looks like, and from there, I'll kind of give you a data point. As an example, if a senior sales leader didn't come on a call before execution of the agreement and wasn't part of the buying committee, the probability that the customer actually had a great outcome and didn't turn into a one and done, I mean, it was almost zero that there was success. Sales, marketing, and enablement had to be aligned. And we had all kinds of these insights. We go, okay, another one as an example. If, as an example, they come on to a call and all they want to know is, does social selling create lead flow in the next 90 days? Because if it doesn't, then they're debating whether social selling is a thing that they want to do, versus customers that come on and know that they need to go through a digital transformation. And like any other change management, it takes time. Again, the difference between success and failure was so evident. And so now we know what to look for pre-call. And if they don't hit these certain markers, let's be honest with ourselves and jump out of this deal.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that, having analyzed several thousand sales funnels, I can tell you that the vast majority, well over 95% of the funnels we've looked at, the smallest number of things in that funnel are real opportunities. Most of it's larded with hopes and wishes and dreams and aspirations, but painfully few opportunities.
So the symptoms. What are the symptoms that you're seeing? Oh, man, I got to get better with clicking the mouse here. What are the symptoms that you're...
Hey, man, nobody cares. Nobody cares. I'm going to say right now. That's cool. If you don't have to be a master clicker to do this. Yeah. A couple of things. First of all, if you look down the first three of these, I think it's an unusual company that doesn't have these symptoms. The eternal and forever lamentation about poor forecasts. Poor forecasts are not the fault of the CRM, the salesperson, the sales manager, fill in the blank. It's the failure to recognize that what governs the forecast is customer behavior, not salesperson activity. And being able to recognize those stages I talked about is the difference between an accurate forecast and a finger in the wind guess. Deals stall in funnels all the time. If you have an understanding of those core skills, when they stall, you know the reason, and the number that stall are a fraction of what happens absent those skills. Putting the target on the demo as saying, well, whenever we do a demo, we have a high close rate, is an odd twist of the use of statistics. That may well be true. It doesn't mean one is causative or even correlated. It could be a pure coincidence. You're probably eliminating many of the deals that you could have closed if you've done some additional work between the so-called discovery call and the demo. If you only have demo followed immediately after a discovery call, be concerned because the core skills are obviously not being used. And of course, this has put this dream in everyone's head that AI is going to create the absence of the need for salespeople. Good luck. And where it'll happen is if you want to sell cheap, if you want to be the cheapest solution, if you want to have click to close, if you want to have the ability to compete on a price basis only, then yeah, you don't need salespeople. Otherwise, it's a skills-driven position.
Fantastic. And what would you say is the one? So you have 1,000 companies you walk in the door into in 2018. What is the one that they may feel is their core symptom, but is actually just a byproduct of the total greater problem? So maybe you can outline.
Yeah, that's a superb question, Jamie. I love it, and I'm going to give you the fast answer because there's a very specific one. That question is so pregnant we could talk about that for 5 hours. But the number one symptom that people see as a problem, not a symptom, it's almost like they see it as the disease, not the symptom, is the idea of this inaccurate forecast.
Yeah.
Now they'll reassure you. I hear constantly managers tell me, it always makes me laugh. We close 75% of the deals in our funnel. That's a bunch of crap. You do not. You close 75% of the deals that you sort of look back ex post facto and thought were real. The fact is you don't know what percentage because you're not even keeping track of it. That is a symptom of a greater disease. It is not the disease itself. That is a classic example of a symptom of poor sales skills.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get into now we've got these steps, this journey that you recommend that leaders need to look at as they enable their team.
Yeah, so I mentioned that this subject of professional sales has been studied for 70 years. We will dismiss for the moment the history of that, but two axioms came out of that I think are incredibly thought-provoking. And again, I would encourage folks on this call to really give some reflection on what does this mean in terms of day-to-day sales execution. Axiom 1, customers will put a greater value always on what they tell the seller, and here's the key, and what they conclude for themselves than they will put on what a seller tells them. Unless, Axiom 2 is at play, customers will put greater value on what they ask for than what a seller freely offers. At the bottom it says, selling is about conclusions and invitations. The skillful interaction is one in which the seller is able to assist the customer to come to key conclusions. We want them to tell us why we're great. We want them to tell us why we're different, what benefits they see they'll get. We don't tell them that. And if we're going to offer up an opinion, our insight, our demo, our proposal, or anything else, we want to elicit an invitation if it's not forthcoming. If we do those two things, we are employing the skills that make all this technology phenomenally more successful. So part of it is understanding the skills associated with those two acts.
I'm in the midst of reading a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference. It's a negotiating book. It's actually at the highest levels used by it is designed by the FBI in their counterterrorism and their kidnap and ransom division. And Chris Voss led it. Long of the short is he walks through step by step on negotiating best practices. And one of them, it was just, like when you hear it, sometimes you're like, oh, that's so obvious. Every question is posed in only two types, what's and how's. So it's crazy. He shows the difference when you ask a customer which or who, because a lot of them can come to really short answers, or they don't create a self-reflection from the customer. So long and the short is he then poses things that a statement that you want to blurt out, he poses it as a what and a how, and he gets them to elaborate. And that elaboration gets self-reflection. And they only realize because they have to search for the answer on the how. As they talk it through, they begin to talk themselves in or out of things. It's an incredible book. It works on everybody except my 4-year-old. But
well, let me make a couple of comments on that. First of all, I've seen that book and I think it's outstanding. I think what Chris Voss probably rediscovered, if he wasn't technically trained in selling, is that the language associated with what you just said has again been around for almost 45 years, and those conclusions were drawn from the second group of researchers that were studying this field. Those two things have language other than what's and how's. They have lots of different labels, but the idea is causing the customer to reflect and think deeper about their own situation is the route to professional persuasion.
Yeah.
It is not through the elegance of your demonstration, the slides you have, or whatever.
Interesting. And you and I will talk about slides and demos, because I am learning as I watch people who are 10x better than I. There is no demo needed. Like it is, anyways. We'll come to that in a second. Okay, step 2, core skills. Break it down for us, Tom.
Yeah, I'm not going to read all these to you. Let me just say that curiosity is associated with an open mind, and there are particular ways of driving that open mind in even the most intransigent me versus you customer, provided that customer actually has something they need to fix, accomplish, or avoid. Recognizing what drives opportunity, change. Change drives opportunity, and it manifests itself in different ways. The third one, I think, is probably the key to the whole kingdom. Knowing what information to uncover, when to uncover it, and who to uncover it from is really kind of the key to the whole thing. And when we think of how discovery is implemented today, it's so misguided. It's a long series of questions that have no value to the prospect. They only have value to the seller. If we're going to drive insight, we're going to do that with the questions we ask, as you just elegantly described with Chris Boss's work. So these things about rapport and listening, they sound so soft. They're not. They're the real key to being able to use these things. This looks like a long list. You got 7 bullets there. All of this can be learned very quickly. To become the master of it, it must be practiced consistently. I always point out there's a big difference between understanding and performance. I can explain exactly how to hit a golf ball straight. I can't do it to save my life. I think it's in that we've lost a lot of this idea of the practice of these skills, not just the understanding of them.
And as we get to the next point, I'll ask you a question as we're doing this, and it doesn't necessarily correlate with this slide, but do you believe that there's an underinvestment in frontline sales managers and leaders in general to be able, so it's one thing for the seller to be able to execute these plays, but then what about the frontline sales manager who's able to coach and lead these people? Because I remember when I started my sales career, I learned through osmosis, and the sales leaders that I worked for were classic Xerox trained guys, and they were legends in the boardroom. And do you find that over time that also that dilution at the sales leader level or frontline sales leader level has created the dilution of then the sales rep?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. When Xerox was the penultimate sales training organization, people don't know, but they used to have to be trained in training every day for 9 months before you were allowed in front of a customer. And your training began with a 2-month residential program in Leesburg, Virginia. Therein lies the point. You could convey all of the information and principles fairly quickly. Mastering them and becoming fluent and comfortable was another matter. Now, that amount of time is no longer necessary, but there has been a great decrease in the number of managers who have any degree of preparation to manage. We tend to take our best salesperson, hand them the clipboard, say, come off the field, but make the team work better. And then that's it. We don't give them anything else. So yeah, I think there's been both a decline in the investment of the sellers and a complete absence of investment in preparing managers to do what needs to be done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So Tom, have you listened?
Yeah, it's so funny. The whole world in sales is I don't care what your introduction to sales training was. Everybody learns a questioning model. Most of them are a cute little 4-letter acronym, and they march off and begin spewing out questions. One realization I'll give you that if it's any kind of acronym, all it really represents is a taxonomy of every possible question in the language. Number 2, nobody bothers to tell you about how to introduce those questions and how to listen for the answers. And so we're actually we're establishing anti-rapport with our customers. We interrogate, get information, ask for a demo. It just is nonsensical. I can show you very quickly how to drive rapport in any relationship. It's never more important than in one where you're trying to build the trust of a counseling salesperson. If you haven't been trained in active or attentive listening, you're missing a piece of the puzzle.
It's fantastic. And I'm listening for my cue to go to the next slide, Tom.
Well done, Jamie. Unbelievable. So as I said before, there is a big difference between knowledge and skill. Execution, it takes practice, feedback, and measurement. That's what we want to concentrate on as managers. We want to concentrate on helping people. It doesn't take much. It takes consistency. 30 minutes a month is showing an amazing inflection point of a manager investing in some quality coaching. The trick is it's consistency. It's not measured in length of time that we're involved.
Maybe for the audience, you could tell everyone what is standard operating procedures as an expectation from a sales coach, from amount of time they should spend on their one-on-ones to maybe town halling everyone on their team for updates. Like, what are you seeing as standard operating procedures? And then what are you seeing as best in class? And then the gap between them.
Yeah. So the gap is actually enormous between best practice and common practice. So the common practice is there is an aspiration on the part of the manager to coach, and they don't do any of it. They report that they are, and then you survey the salespeople working for them, and they say they never get coached. Number two, there is a relentless attention to the results the manager expects. It's impossible to manage a result. You can only manage an activity.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of focus on telling people make quota, which is the same thing as saying grow taller, and with no help on the how I'm going to do better in getting there. Best practice is the manager focuses as a very high priority on the small collection of activities that the salespeople need to do, and in particular focuses on, are we doing the right activities in the right cadence well enough? And there's specific measures that you can use to identify each of those three categories where you're doing exceptionally well, doing adequately, or falling short. And in best practice world-class companies, managers spend all of their time evaluating, coaching, and giving feedback at the activity level, knowing that they have calculated those activities in terms of what activities, how often, and how well, in such a way that the results will be inevitable if they simply hit the right marks on those things they can manage.
Yeah, and there's a great book on this that can help as a guide, Jason Jordan's Cracking the Sales Management Code from Vantage Point. It just is exactly as to Tom's point. Everybody's focused on the sales objective, your monthly or quarterly number, or even the business outcome that they need. But the only thing you can influence is action and activity. This is fantastic, Tom. So technology helps, but people sell. I am in full agreement on this, and this is becoming, this kind of statement is now kind of circulating the sales universe. I don't know anybody has put their thumb on who kind of invented it. I know I didn't. But I use it. Tom, maybe its origin and why it's become swinging all the way around again, and it's in front of everybody's face. How critical they have to understand this.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's one of these things that it takes to become kind of good at this. You'll notice that it says mindset, skill set, tool set, and I know, Jamie, you live in this world. I mean, this is kind of one of those things that I think Sales for Life has done exceptionally well, as understanding the interaction of these things and how they really are the path to success. Maybe you could actually tell us a little bit about what you've observed as sort of common versus best practice in that.
Yeah, and I'll give you, and I'm the king of analogies, so I love using an analogy as an example. So a tool set. Especially in technology and telecom companies, which are early adopters, moving towards early majority as digital maturity is coming over the next 10-year horizon. What is happening is enablement teams are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're going out and buying LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is the exact same thing of saying, okay, my team needs to commute to work from A to B. So what I did is I went out and I bought everybody a Porsche 911. Awesome. So they bought the tool set. Here's the challenge. A fraction of the team was proficient drivers. There's a huge chunk that rode the subway every day and they didn't have a driver's license. Then there's another portion that couldn't drive a manual transmission. Then and then what you did is you said, well, I bought you these cars to get from A to B. What I'm going to do is throw you the owner's manual. So you can watch a couple videos on how to be proficient with social media and LinkedIn. And here's the owner's manual to the 911. Now, I want you to jump on the Nürburgring, and you still need to be able to do 7-minute hot laps. And what they don't understand is, first, you need to convince the team why transporting yourself from A to B more efficiently and through speed is better through the Porsche than the subway or a taxi. Then you have to give them the skills. How do I get it out of first gear? How do I shift? How do I take the apex of a corner? Then I'm because all technology is an accelerant. It is an amplifier. So now I can actually get from A to B much faster because you've helped me utilize the 911. Otherwise, it'll just sit in the driveway. And this is what enablement teams can never figure out. Why is it that I spent $100,000 in Navigator licenses and I go into my user data and it's brutal? People aren't using it. And how come all these 911s are sitting in people's driveways? It's because they're more comfortable riding the subway because they did that for 10 years. They don't see the purpose of actually driving really fast on a highway. So that's my analogy of, and if you're an enablement leader or a CEO or a VP of sales making these massive investments, understand that if you don't really believe that getting from one end of a city to another in a Porsche is better than one end of the city than the other on the subway, then your really expensive rocket machine has no value to people. So that is my mindset, skill set, tool set. And that's why today we sit in the age of the customer. And exactly to Tom's point, our job is to help a buyer along a journey because they're going to arm themselves with information, whether you like it or not. Your job is to facilitate this learning in a teacher-student environment and help them understand the pitfalls, the roadmaps, the roadblocks, the challenges. You know, when I'm talking to a customer, I'm trying. Here's again, another analogy. My job is to show them the Emerald City in advance and explain to them that you are going to go through the scary forest on the yellow brick road. You're going to see the flying monkeys. Here's how it's all going to happen. But my job is to mitigate the risk of the crazy screaming trees and the flying monkeys yelling at you. And the more that a seller can help somebody understand that journey, the better off they're going to be. And the data from Forrester and Corporate Visions, I believe wholeheartedly that if you were first to teach somebody something new, the probability that that customer comes back to you, and you'll know when you've done this, especially in companies that deal with RFIs, RFQs, RFPs, when you read an RFP and you go, oh my God, it was like I wrote this thing. And it's because, and I hear it all the time, we'll get into a discovery call or a proposal meeting, and people are talking in, whether it's virtual or in the boardroom, and they're telling stories or using this vernacular, and I laugh and I say, holy crap, they got that from my book, or they got that from our blogs or videos. They don't even realize they're regurgitating me back to me. And that's when you know you're doing a great job, is that your champions or influencers, you hear them selling stories internally through your own language. You're doing a great job. I'm going to pause for a second. Tom, how do you like my 9/11 hot lap story?
I loved it. I thought that was fantastic. Oh, that's great. I love the idea. Like we bought this expensive machine. It's sitting in the garage, and the guys on the subway. So that was awesome. I do want to ask you a question about these data here on the slide, and I want to offer up an observation and let you kind of react to it. I think the important data on that slide are the three definitions beneath the three major points. The customer due diligence begins, the customer's first contact, and the customer decision. And that stretch that goes between first contact and decision was the cycle I was talking about. I think what's really interesting is, regardless of whether it's 74% or 17% or 28%, it almost doesn't matter to me how much the percentage is. But the idea that your buyer is going to come armed, the reason Forrester said it's the age of the customer is because the customer is going to come armed with a point of view and with the ability to understand a lot about you and your customers before you get there. So if all you're going to do is tell them about you and tell them about your product, your service, and maybe even make commentary about your competitors, they can do it all online, man. They don't need you. Yeah. And I wonder if you've been seeing that also, Jamie. I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to use it through the eyes of our customers because we sell digital transformation. The reality is a huge percentage of our lead flow come inbound, and our customers are coming so pre-educated, and we've actually measured this. We call it the content consumption story as an example. Give or take 45%, it's 43% of customers learning through our content will happen before my sales team even picks up the phone for the very first time to talk to the customer. 75% of all the content they consume happens before we have a discovery call. So that's how much learning happens on our end. But we're seeing it through our customers that the companies are coming, and as they became more digital and social, what it did is it changed the velocity of the deal. So let's say your average sales cycle was 6 months. They started plotting it as they became digital sellers, and they went, oh my, like not only are we creating more leads and conversion improves, but one of the ones that they didn't, or they expected, but was a really nice to see, was that the customer came armed with maybe the buying committee that was needed. Or they came and those top 10 stupid questions are now been answered through FAQ information. And they've read enough blogs where they don't ask the elementary questions anymore. They're armed and they're ready for the double click questions. So the big thing we're seeing is that the customer's coming and it feels like, holy crap, have you ever been talking to our competitors? Like, how do you know all these things? But it's because they've gone from why, they're deep into the how, and they're halfway between the how and the who right now. And they have like 5 more things they need to check off their box before they start making decisions. And you're there to facilitate those questions. And
yeah, brilliant. That's brilliant.
The consultative seller understands that you are not selling, you are facilitating a journey. You realize that the buyer has the same social tools you do. There's no information, there is no peer group online or online forum or blog that they can't read to get enough information, to Tom's point, to create a preconceived idea of what they want. And then the ideal consultative seller uses data and insights as triggers. They don't use it as the end all be all, they use it as triggers to have more contextual conversations. They recognize that I, as an account-based seller, are also responsible for a form of marketing in my territory. My marketing team is concentrating on brand and macro lead flow for the company. I sell into the state of Massachusetts. My responsibility are the accounts in my wheelhouse and my ring fence. And those 25 accounts I need to treat them with the same respect a marketer would, as if this was we're a business within a business. So we embrace all of this technology to it be an accelerant to the sales skills. I come back to it from an analogy standpoint. If you put a tool on top of somebody that does not know what to do, it's like putting a flame on mayonnaise, or like putting fire to mayonnaise. You're going to get nothing out of it. The purpose of technology is an accelerant, right? You want to put it onto already like an aerosol can, right? That's what you want to be concentrating on. And the only way to do this, and Tom and I, listen, you can look at us and say, yeah, you're biased. You come from a training industry. No, because I'll tell you a quick story. I was telling Tom this before. Customer of ours, CA Technologies, 3,000 sellers. Over the course of 3 years, they wanted to prove empirically that learning translates into action, action translates into results. They used our courseware as a litmus test, and they measured those that became certified as a digital seller versus those that gave up halfway. Those that became certified over 6 months created 38% more revenue and 55% more pipeline in 6 months. Why? It has nothing to do with social selling, or very little to do with social selling. It has to do with the fact that those that are willing to learn sit in front of the class and raise their hand, give themselves a highly influenced ability to turn that into action because they absorbed it. Those that turn action and activity more, to Tom's point, manage to activity. If you do more things, then you give yourself a better chance at the result. And this is a perfect opportunity for you as leaders to use learning in 2018 as your gateway to identify who's going to sit on my bus, who do I want to keep, who's an old dog, who's willing to adapt, and that's where you're going to get your yield and throughput from people. That doesn't cost you like tech stack does. If you can just get 5 to 10% out of every more seller, a yield and throughput, that's going to be massive, right? So Tom, maybe you want to address that. If you're doing cost benefit analysis, learning development, the skill gap versus the tech stack, and that's one thing that, you just gave me a blog idea. I don't think customers really appreciate the expense of the sales stack in comparison to L&D.
Yeah, so Jamie, you always inspire me. I've got 2 comments to make. One, I would encourage anybody listening to this to actually calculate the cost of a lead. Only don't do it the traditional way. I want you to add in the cost of all those technologies. I want to add in all the things that marketing does. I want to add in all of the SDR, BDRs you may have. And then I want you to divide that by the number of actual qualified leads that translated into opportunity in the funnel and see what that number looks like. I guarantee it'll scare you. Number 2, the key to this whole entire conversation we are having was the point you made about the CA data. The idea of completion. One of the worst words in the world is training. Nobody likes it. Everybody hates going, and every manager hates buying it.
Yeah.
And when you buy training, you have only bought the start to something. In reality, you haven't even seen the movie yet. You've just gotten the ticket, and you got a right to go in and sit down. But the movie takes place after the training is over. Completion is the key. What is completion? I've learned in training what to do. I move to competency, fluency, and comfort by completing that process. And that process goes beyond that training event. So, there is living data that proves the point. Jamie just gave it to you. And I guarantee you, each of us could ask any 10 customers, and if they've gone through that comparison, the exact same kind of magnitude will be realized. So if you're going to buy training, don't make the same mistake people often make with technology. Jamie's Navigator example is beautiful. LinkedIn Navigator. Don't make the mistake of thinking just going to training is going to make a difference, because it isn't.
Yeah, fantastic. And Tom, I realized that you and I, who love talking, went over time. And I'm not even certain, because I'm probably getting pinged from our team, hey, you're talking too long. I'm not sure that we'll be able to answer any questions. But here's what you can do, everybody. Here's Tom's contact information. And let me go back to full screen. And here's our contact information. Please ping us. Happy to, and you're going to see from both of us. We will be resources. And actually, you said something at the beginning I didn't address, really valuable. Where the world's moving to, Tom, is people laugh about this in the ad agency world. My wife is a VP at an ad agency where they have to do work on spec. They have to actually, the creative agencies actually have to come to the customer with the product in hand. Like, here's what your commercial is going to look like. So they spend weeks developing it. And then the customer decides, do they turn them down or go with another agency? But that's how much value now companies are it's an extreme example, but companies are starting to expect, and I'm not even talking about giving your product away for free. I'm not talking about that. Is that you are building ROI calculators. You are doing all of this kind of work in advance to make it easy for your customer to buy. I'm seeing it more and more that we have to do a lot of heavy lifting for companies. But anyways, Tom and I are here to help, and you can reach out to us. We have two great blogs that you can read. And Tom, any final questions or thoughts?
No, it's just a joy to do this, Jamie. You're spectacular. I can't tell you how honored I am and pleased I am that you invited me. You ring the bell. I'll sign up anytime, brother.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate it. Team, as per the normal question I always get, yes, this is recorded and it will be available in a blog very shortly. So thank you, everybody, and looking forward to next steps.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot.